They sat me in the garage. Fold-out chair, plastic table, a fan that barely worked. At my parents' anniversary party. And when I asked my dad why, he didn't blink. It's just for extended family. Extended family. Everyone else was seated inside. Warm lighting, music, catered plates. Even my cousin Mark was there, the same cousin who once stole money from their safe. He was inside, laughing, toasting. I was in the garage. Like clutter. Like something they didn't want to show the guests. My name is Selena, and from wherever you're watching this video, stay with me, because sometimes the most beautiful kind of revenge is the one that's so silent it echoes. I didn't make a scene. Not right away. I sat there for 7 full minutes just looking around, at the extension cords on the wall, the old bike no one had ridden in years, the folding table with lukewarm appetizers and paper napkins. I looked down at my dress, the one I'd saved up for. Simple, elegant, black. The heels I'd borrowed from a friend just for the occasion. I had driven 3 hours, bought a thoughtful gift, wrote a letter inside it that I'd cried over twice, and now I was sharing a table with a lawn mower. I stood up, walked inside, and scanned the room. There was Mark, telling a story about his last vacation. There was Aunt Renee, sitting at the table I should have been at. There was my mother, laughing as if she didn't know where I was. I walked to the front, right past the cake, right up to the gift table, picked up my envelope. Quietly, intentionally, my father saw me, his eyebrows raised. "Selena, what are you doing?" I looked right at him, extending the respect you gave me. Then I turned, held up the envelope, and said, loud enough for the room to hear, "Extend this." I walked out the front door. No screaming, no tears, no big scene, just silence. And then I heard her, my mother, running after me in heels, calling my name, asking, "Wait, what are you doing? Don't do this." But it was already done, because that night they didn't just seat me in the garage. They told the truth, the one they'd been hinting at for years. And I finally listened, but they had no idea what I'd been preparing all along. And what happened next would strip them of the one thing they valued more than reputation. Control. I was always the good one, the helper, the polite one, the one who didn't ask for much. If Mark got caught shoplifting, I was the one they sent to keep him company while he cried in the car. If my older sister threw a fit during dinner, I was the one who cleaned the table and quietly packed up leftovers while everyone pretended nothing happened. Being useful became my only currency, but being visible, that was never allowed. When I got into university on a partial scholarship, my dad barely looked up from his laptop. "That's great, but let's not brag. Your cousin Daniel got a full ride." When I landed my first job, an entry-level admin position with a nonprofit I loved, my mom asked, "Will that even cover rent?" They didn't mean to be cruel. At least, that's what I used to tell myself. They were just selective with their attention, selective with their praise, selective with who they brought forward when company came over. It was always the same people, the cousin who lied, the uncle who drank, the sister who dropped out and moved back home. They all got second chances. They all got seats at the table. Me, I got duties. Help set the table, Selena. Run to the store, Selena. Can you pick up Mark from the station? The worst part, I kept saying yes, because somewhere inside, I believed if I kept being helpful, they'd eventually see me, eventually choose me. But what happened at that anniversary party? That was my breaking point. Not because of the garage, but because when I looked through the window from the outside, I saw my family laughing like I wasn't missing, like they hadn't noticed I was gone. That's when I realized I wasn't just excluded. I was optional, replaceable, easily boxed away when I didn't fit the image they wanted to display. And in that moment, standing on the front lawn in borrowed heels, envelope clutched in one hand, and 27 years of swallowed pride in the other, I made a decision. Not just to walk away, but to show them what happens when the invisible one finally removes her support. Because they had no idea just how much of their life I held together. And when I let go, they would feel it. I didn't call the next day, didn't text, didn't apologize. I just vanished. Not from the world, just from theirs. No more answering my mother's calls on the first ring. No more sending reminders for doctor appointments. No more updating the extended family spreadsheet I had managed for the past 6 years. Birthdays, allergies, emergency contacts, all of it. It was subtle at first. Just a small emptiness. But small cracks turn into deep ones, fast. 3 days after the party, my sister texted, "Hey, Mom's asking if you mailed the thank you cards for the florist and DJ? She thought you'd already handled it." I didn't reply, because I had always handled it. Quietly, automatically, invisibly. But now, they were on their own. By the end of the week, I heard from Aunt Renee, the same one who had taken my seat at the party without blinking. "Hi, sweetheart. Your mom said you were upset? She didn't mean to offend you. It was just a mix-up with the seating." A mix-up. Funny how the only mix-ups always happen to me. The gift envelope was never mentioned. They didn't ask what was inside. A generous check and a handwritten letter with every memory I had of their marriage. Every time I saw them love each other in ways they didn't see themselves. They didn't ask because they assumed they were still entitled to it. My father left a voicemail on day 9. "Selena, I know you're upset, but this little tantrum? It's making things harder for everyone. Just call your mother and sort it out." Tantrum. That was the word. Because in his world, the only reason a woman ever stands up for herself is emotion. Not boundaries. Not hurt. Not a lifetime of being overlooked. Just drama. That message? I saved it, not to keep the pain, but to remind myself why I left. Then came the mistake. My mother tried to host a small brunch with her charity friends. A post-party thank you. She assumed I'd scheduled the catering. She assumed I'd sent the invites. Confirmed the guest list. Coordinated with the florist. She even texted me, "Make sure they bring lilies. You know I hate roses." I left it on read. The day of the brunch? Nothing arrived. The guests stood in a half-decorated backyard. No food. No drinks. No music. Just embarrassment. And still, she didn't say the words I was waiting for. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "We need you." Not, "We were wrong." Just this, "I thought you'd take the high road, Selena." But here's what she didn't understand. I was on the high road. I just stopped carrying their load with me. I didn't want revenge. Not the movie kind. Not the screaming, flipping tables, burn it all down kind. I wanted truth. I wanted them to see the machine they'd built and how much of it only ran because I turned the gears in the background. So I started with the family fund. A long time ago, my parents opened a joint savings account for family emergencies. Nothing formal, just something to cover last-minute plane tickets, urgent expenses, birthdays no one budgeted for. They let everyone use it, as long as it went through me. I'd been tracking it for years. I had login access, monthly reports, even the tax statements they forgot I prepared every April. They never noticed it was my name on the backup authorization form. They just assumed I'd always manage it, like the polite daughter I was trained to be. That same week, I requested my removal. Quietly, formally, legally. I also sent a courtesy notice to the bank, flagging inconsistencies I'd long kept quiet about. Duplicate reimbursements, unexplained withdrawals, even a cash transfer to my cousin Mark. Yes, the same one who stole from them years ago. Nothing criminal, just sloppy. They'd been too comfortable for too long. Next, I contacted my cousin Dahlia, the only one who ever sat with me in the kitchen while the real guests laughed in the next room. She's a graphic designer now. Brilliant. Underpaid. I offered her a project, one I'd been planning for months but never had the nerve to start. A community blog. Small. Focused on quiet family estrangement. Stories from people like me. People who weren't kicked out violently, just gently set aside until they disappeared. We called it The Spare Chair. Dahlia designed the logo. I wrote the first piece. We didn't name names, but anyone who knew my parents would know exactly who that first story was about. And finally, I pulled the thread they never thought I'd touch. The anniversary photos. A distant cousin had taken them. I had offered to coordinate the photographer. In return, he'd given me full access to the folder. I downloaded everything. Every picture of everyone, except me, because I wasn't in them. Not even one. but the captions they wrote online said, "So grateful to have our whole family together. A perfect day." So I emailed the photographer, asked him to take the gallery down. He agreed and added a line I'll never forget. They said it was a family portrait, but it looked like something was missing. Exactly, something was. And they were finally starting to feel it. They didn't notice the collapse all at once. It came in fragments. A brunch canceled, a fund frozen, a gallery gone. But the moment that really hit? The night of the follow-up celebration dinner, the one my mother planned to repair our image with her friends. The florist didn't show. The menu was wrong. One of the guests canceled, citing confusion around the event's coordination. Why? Because for years that had all gone through me. I wasn't invited this time, obviously, but I still got photos from Dahlia, who had a friend working the event. My mother looked tired. My father? Distracted, like a man realizing the stage manager quit in the middle of the performance. 2 days later, I received a text from my mother. "I wish you'd reconsider all this. Family doesn't treat each other this way, especially over something so small. Small, being seated in the garage like an afterthought, having your gift taken off the table, hearing your own father say extended family while your thief of a cousin sat front row. That wasn't small. That was pattern. A pattern I had finally broken." Then the photos vanished from their Facebook albums. The ones labeled Perfect Night and Grateful for a Whole Family. Gone. Not replaced. Just quietly deleted. Like removing the evidence would erase the truth. They didn't know I'd already backed them up. Because I wasn't trying to destroy their story. I was documenting mine. That same week, I published my third post on the spare chair. It was titled, "The Day I Stopped Apologizing for Taking Up Space." No names, no spite, just truth. The post went semi-viral in family forums and quiet corners of the internet. It was shared by therapists, grief coaches, adult children who had sat through one too many dinners in silence. And at the very bottom, I left this. Sometimes it's not the shouting that breaks you. It's the smile across the table while they ignore your empty plate. My inbox flooded, not with hate, with recognition. You wrote what I've never been able to say out loud. I thought I was the only one. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But one email stood out. It was from a woman in her 50s. They sat me next to the coat rack at my own sister's wedding. I was 7 months pregnant and nobody said a word. I wish I'd walked out like you did. I cried reading it, not because I was sad, because I wasn't alone. And when you've spent a lifetime being told to wait your turn, fade into the background, and be the bigger person, hearing "me too" is more powerful than any apology. Back in my parents' world, they were still trying to keep things together. But now, even their friends were asking quiet questions. Where's Selena these days? Did I hear she runs something online now? Was she not at the party? And for the first time, they had no answer, because the person they always dismissed had become the one they couldn't explain away. They always thought of me as the stable one. Never dramatic, never demanding, never difficult, which made me the perfect person to erase quietly until they needed something handled, fixed, or forgotten. But when the world started noticing I was gone, their story stopped making sense. It started with a local newsletter feature about generational leadership in community families. They were interviewed about the family fund, the same one I'd quietly stepped away from. The article mentioned Selena handled our logistics for years, in past tense. But one of the reporters had followed the spare chair. She emailed me for a quote. I declined. Still, she connected the dots. The story went live with this sentence. Notably absent from recent events is Selena, long considered the logistical core of the family's philanthropic work. Just one sentence, but it opened a floodgate. Within days, the foundation received 2 calls from longtime donors. Not angry, just curious. We were under the impression Selena still coordinated programs. Has that changed? Why is her name not on any of the upcoming campaigns? They didn't have an answer, because for years they never needed one. I was just the daughter in the background. Now the background was missing, and people noticed. Meanwhile, the spare chair kept growing. Submissions tripled. Dahlia and I had to build a second site folder just to organize the stories pouring in. There was one from a teacher whose mother told her not to bring her same-sex partner to Thanksgiving. Another from a man who was told he could sit with the caterers at his brother's wedding. Each story different, but the message was the same. You're welcome here, as long as you don't need a real seat. My parents still didn't reach out with anything real. My mother forwarded an invite to a smaller, more intimate dinner. No subject line, no apology, just, we'll keep a spot open. That was it. I didn't reply, because I didn't want a spot. I wanted respect. And now, I had it, from people who never once made me beg for it. Then came the audit. Remember that family fund? Turns out the casual management had caught attention after my formal exit. The bank flagged repeated cash withdrawals from multiple relatives, none of which were properly tracked. No one was accused of theft, but questions were asked. And for a family obsessed with control and image, being questioned was the worst kind of scandal. My cousin Mark messaged me out of nowhere. You're really trying to ruin everyone, huh? I didn't respond, because I wasn't trying to ruin anything. I had just stopped protecting the illusion. I received a final email from my father. 3 words. We're disappointed, Selena. Not surprised. Not curious. Not sorry. Just disappointed. I almost laughed, because in the end, disappointment was mutual. Except I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped pretending there ever was one. I always thought rising would feel like revenge, like applause, like validation, like finally being proven right in front of everyone who doubted me. But it didn't. It felt like quiet mornings, like drinking coffee in a space that didn't ask me to shrink, like laughing with people who didn't keep score, like watching my own reflection grow softer and stronger at the same time. That was the real rise. The spare chair hit 100,000 monthly readers. We didn't market it, didn't chase virality, just let the story speak. We added a podcast, invited real people to share their moments. Not trauma porn, just truth. One episode, I was uninvited to my own baby shower. Another, he called me dramatic. I called a moving truck. Every voice was a brick in the house I never had growing up. A house where no one had to earn their seat. Where family wasn't a weapon. Where silence didn't mean safety, it meant choice. I moved into a small 2-bedroom place on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy. No crown molding. No long dining table built to impress guests. Just bookshelves I filled myself. Walls I painted the exact shade of green the first wanted. And a desk where I wrote in the early mornings, not for approval, but for myself. Sometimes I lit a candle before I wrote. I always chose the same scent, fig and cedar, warm, earthy, whole. I made new friends, not ones who knew my parents, not ones who asked, but do you think they meant to hurt you? Just people who took me as I was. People who said, you don't owe anyone your softness just because they raised you. My sister reached out eventually. An email. I don't agree with how you handled it, but I miss you. That was it. No ownership. No accountability. Just a thread. Hoping I'd be the one to weave the whole thing back together. I didn't respond. Because I wasn't interested in returning to the table. I was building better ones. And the people who sat at mine brought their own napkins. They didn't expect me to serve them and thank them for being there. One day I was interviewed for a podcast I admired. They asked, what would you say to the version of yourself who stayed in the garage that night? I took a long breath before I answered. I'd say, I know you're scared. I know you think leaving makes you selfish. But one day, you'll sit at your own table, and you'll realize that leaving wasn't betrayal. It was the beginning of becoming someone no one gets to ignore again. I still remember the exact sound the chair made when I stood up from it in the garage. That awkward metal scrape, one I was supposed to ignore. One that was meant to blend into the background of just be grateful you're invited. It was the moment I chose myself, before I even knew what choosing myself looked like. That sound, it became the start of everything. Sometimes I drive past my parents' neighborhood, not to stare at the house, not to fantasize about some dramatic reunion, just to remind myself that I don't live there anymore. Not physically, not emotionally, not in the quiet corners of my mind that used to hope for something soft to bloom where only sharp edges had ever been. I don't hate them, truly, but I don't miss them either. I miss the idea of them. The version of family I tried to believe in. The version of me that thought if I just stayed helpful long enough, I'd finally be chosen without needing to prove myself. That girl? She deserved better. And now, she has it. My mother never apologized. My father never called. But that's okay, because closure doesn't always come from an apology. Sometimes it comes from no longer needing one. Sometimes it's found in the sound of your own voice when it's finally loud enough to fill the room they kept trying to shrink you out of. Sometimes it's found in silence you chose. Last month, someone from the original anniversary party messaged me. Not family, just one of the guests. I didn't know what happened that night, but I remember you. You were the only one who looked real in the whole room. I stared at the message for a long time, because I used to think being quiet meant being small. Now, I know better. Being quiet can mean power. Being calm can mean certainty. And walking away doesn't make you heartless. It makes you free. Sometimes I think about the letter I wrote that night, the one I had sealed inside the envelope on the gift table. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was a letter of memories, of thank yous, of moments I thought mattered. I never gave it to them, but I kept it, not to remind myself of what they lost, to remind myself of what I gave for so long without ever being asked how much it cost me. And now, I give to people who give back. I love without dimming. I stand without permission. They once asked me to sit in the garage so the photos would look better. Now, I don't need to be in the photo because I built the whole frame and the story I'm living now. It may not be picture perfect, but every single part of it includes me.